A very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. This week we begin by thanking and celebrating Sir David Seal and the folks of the People's Market for their continued interest in the production of this series. Similarly, I pause to thank and celebrate Rashid Bess, who has been the producer and the researcher of this mini-series on the East Indian community here in Barbados. I thank all of you. Now, in every corner of the world, there lies within each of us an innate need to connect with something greater than ourselves, a higher power, a supreme being. This desire transcends culture, geography, and time, guiding us to seek meaning, purpose, and a sense of belonging. As children, we were taught that when the British arrived here in Barbados, one of their first priorities was the establishment of a house of worship. Similarly, in the 20th century, when missionaries came to Barbados, they too quickly erected places of worship. Today, we will discuss this deep connection within the Muslim community at the mosque, where faith, prayer, and the call to worship come together to fulfill that timeless human need for spiritual connection.
When they came, earlier they would then pray in their various homes, because remember we said earlier that they live in a commune. And so when it's time for prayer, for example in market, they would then get together for the time of prayer and they would say their prayer. And then the Friday prayer where you have a khutbah or a sermon, then they would have one who is the most knowledgeable would then give a sermon relating to some basic principle of Islam, how you can live a better Islamic life and so on. So mosque is a place where you prostrate. So Muslims go to the mosque 5 times a day. Male and female are allowed to go and pray in the mosque. There's a special section for the male, either on the side of it or either in the back of the male section. Not like in the church where you have male and female sit together. No, that is not the way, because the whole concept of worship is different in Islam compared with Christianity. So Muslims are asked, or is recommended that Muslims go to a place of worship, and you will not see any images as you would see in many of the churches. It's just a simple place where Muslims would go and prostrate. So they pray 5 times a day. First prayer usually be around just before sunrise. Second prayer is around afternoon time. The third one is around 4:30 or in the evening. The fourth one will be just after sunset. And the fifth one is around 8 o'clock or 2 or 3 hours after sunset. So these are the 5 prayers. So you can either go to the mosque to pray, where you would have an imam, a leader, one who leads the prayer. That would be at a fixed time. But if you are praying at home, then you still have a room you can maneuver and you can pray on your own at home. But it is always better to go to the mosque. Why is it always better to go to the mosque? Because you get more blessings. We consider mosque to be the house of Allah, house of God. So you are going there not to keep noise or to shout. And there are also etiquettes of how you walk to the mosque, etiquette how you should behave when you are in the mosque, etiquettes of prayer. So there are etiquettes in Islam, right? So Muslims go there, Muslims pray their prayer, but at a particular special time that is appointed. And then there are those who are unable to go to the mosque, but then pray at home. So mosque is just a place of worship where Muslims go, but Muslims are always very mindful of first thing that they need to do is to have a place of worship.
When the mosque was built, it served not only as a place of prayer, but also as a vital community hub. It became a center for gathering donations to support those in need, and as a distribution point for these contributions, reflecting the mosque's broader role in caring for the community and uplifting the less fortunate amongst us. Interestingly enough, in exploring how they were able to accomplish this, you will understand that the concept of paying interest on borrowed money is entirely foreign to the Muslim community.
The first mosque was built around January 1951 in Kensington New Road. Again, what they do is that in order to build the mosque, we don't believe Muslims do not take interest, nor do they give interest. And it is a no-no to build mosque or any other institution, Islamic institution, with interest. Actually, for us, interest is forbidden. We call it haram in Islam. So they would go house to house and they would start saving money. 50 cents, a dollar in those days, we are talking about in the 50s. And then slowly, they would then save enough money to build the masjid. That is the situation in both Silverstone and Kensington, and even here too. Of course, then the money is greater now. So sometimes you purchase a land and then you started to build. What also happens is that you go to various homes and they give you money. Because for Muslims, building a house of Allah, which is a mosque, is so great. Because so for you to get rewards in the hereafter, because everybody wants to go to heaven. Sometimes what also happens is that there are individuals who have money and so on. They will then lend the money to the committee and so on to build the mosque, but no interest. So they just lend the money. And whenever then the community began to collect the money, or the committee, they would pay them the money. So there are many generous Muslims who have lent their money so that a place of worship can be established in a particular area. For example, in An-Nur Mosque right now we have at Claremont. The community, they went around, the committee from that mosque went around to the Barbadian community to collect the money, but there was not enough money. So they asked those persons who were financially well off, and so they lent them the money. And so that's how this mosque was built too. And it is only now, maybe after 10 years, that loan has been repaid. In other words, they will give you a piece, you know what I mean? And so these are some of the processes that really take place in order to build the mosque. But it is very, very important to Muslims to build their mosque as a house of worship.
Well, with the established association, the purchased land and the wooden house of prayer already on the site, they collected funds and prepared for the construction of their house of prayer.
In March 6, around 1950, they purchased this land for around almost 1,350 something pounds. Of course, they put the money together. All of them got together and got that money. And they purchased this piece of land, but they also had a wooden house. And so they then decided that they are going to use this wooden house as a place of worship. So it was not a mosque. If you can call that, it was a prayer place, It was a congregational prayer house, not a mosque. And so they continued to pray, and then in 1951, they decided that we are going to form an association. And so they formed an association called the Barbados Muslim Association. And the purpose of that association, along with having this prayer house, now you have a building. So people will come here 5 times a day, and say their prayer in a congregation. The purpose of this Barbados Muslim Association, and whose president was Ibrahim Degia, he was also the president of that association, was really, first of all, the purchase of the land is for the prayer, and they wanted to establish this Barbados Muslim Association so that they can help the less fortunate Barbadians in whatever way they possibly can. And that is the purpose of Islam, right? The basic principle of Islam has always been the unity of God and brotherhood of man. So here you have a prayer house where you say your prayer 5 times prayer in congregation. And secondly, here you have a place and you have an office in this particular building where you will have people coming in and making donation to see how we can help the less fortunate. And those who wish to get some donation will also come to this office. So they serve two purposes. It was a twofold purpose. And of course, the committee at that time, they had formed a committee. And the committee also had two books, two set of accounts. One for the collections of building the future mosque, because this was just a temporary place. And secondly, a book so that they can record the income donations for the helping the Barbadians and those who will be coming to collect that donation. And so what the committee also used to do every week then, they would go to the people around this area, if you want to call it the nearby community, and they would collect money from them. And again, the purpose of the collection has always been twofold: for the purpose of building the mosque, and also for the purpose of making donations or giving donations to the less fortunate people in Barbados, especially around the area. As you notice, around this area, they are the lower income people who live around the area. So there's always this need and basic needs. So they wanted to provide that too. So they continue to, collect money. But of course, the community was small. The income was very, very small. Remember, we talked about collecting 50 cents and $1 and so on. So they were contributing very little.
Well, the Muslims extended their kindness to a couple affected by bad weather, welcoming them into their homes during a time of need. This act of generosity came full circle as the couple eventually connected them with the right people who helped raise the necessary funds to build a mosque. This story beautifully illustrates how acts of kindness can bring unexpected blessings in return.
And so one day what happened, during Hurricane Jette in 1955, they had two guests from Guyana, two couples, and they came and they were staying at a guest house somewhere in Christchurch. And the guest house was flooded. And so the Muslim went and brought them at their homes and started to take care of them. And so, they told them their plight, that yes, they would like to build a mosque, that's their desire, and that is their wish, but there's not enough sufficient Muslims and not enough sufficient funds that they could do so as rapidly as they would like. So these two guests says, why don't you all come? They invited the members of the committee to come to Guyana so that they could assist them with donations and so on. And of course, the committee readily accepted that invitation. And so two members of the committee then went, that's around 1955, just after Jette, went to Guyana. And these two gentlemen assisted them, so what they did, they took them around to the Muslim community of Guyana, and especially the women assisted them the most. Women, like senior elders and so on, some of the women took off their bangles, their gold bangles, and give it to them as a donation for the building of the mosque. They took off their chains and their rings, and so they were very successful in collecting some donations from Guyana. Of course, they sold the gold and so on in Guyana and brought the cash to Barbados. And that helped them to start the building of the mosque. It still wasn't sufficient fund.
Well, they found a generous benefactor and eventually they appointed a gentleman to oversee the property and manage the construction of the mosque.
So then S.M. Jalil, a businessman in Trinidad, he was also a very good friend of some of the Muslims in Barbados, especially Mr. Degia, who was the president, said, well, why don't you all also come to Trinidad too? And so they went to Trinidad then. And then he also took them to all of his business friends, and he also donated handsomely towards the building of the mosque too. And so they had sufficient fund now to start building the mosque. So earlier, they were praying on the board house, a wooden house. And then later on, what they did too is that where we parked the car on the side there was another little piece of land that was for sale. So they bought that land. And that land also had a small wooden house. And so they then hired Anwar Ali as their muazzin, or their person who will call to pray. So they repaired that wooden house. It was not in the best of shape. So he brought his children and his family, his wife and so on. So he lived there, that's in the back there. Now it's a wall house now. And so he was not only saying azan or calling people to prayer, and those who call to prayer is called muazzin, I mean a caller to prayer. But he was also assisting and supervising or looking after the building of the mosque at the same time. And he did that job until his passing in the 1980s. By the way, his name is Anwar Ali, and he was one of the nicest person that you could find. The neighbors loved him, the children loved him, and he was an avid gardener. So he would plant lots of stuff, vegetables. He would plant bananas, and he would have other stuff, pumpkins and so on. And I remember as a little boy coming here, and afternoon times when he cooking his pumpkin soup. I think it was the best pumpkin soup I ever tasted from him. And not only would he give us, not would he keep it for himself, but he would distribute it to the neighbors, And so that's how popular he was, and everybody would call him Ali Chacha.
Reflecting on the generosity of Ali Chacha. Now let's discuss the construction. Where did the resources come from? You'll find that communities often grow around a mosque. Put differently, the mosque acts as a pull factor.
They started to build and so on. They got all the windows and so on from UK. They ordered special windows and so on. And the masjid was built from white lime. Remember, in those days, quarries, the white lime, that was readily available at that time. And so they used that. And again, like the Muslims on the other side that built the Juma Masjid, the Muslims here also not only just donated money, whatever little they had, but during their off day from work, they would also come and assist in whatever way they can. So that would save the cost of the building the masjid. So this is how they had started to build the masjid, and slowly the more and more communities started to settle around the area of the masjid. And that usually happens wherever you go in any part of the world. Whenever you see a mosque being built, you'll find more and more Muslim community gravitating towards where the mosque is, so that it will be easier for them to come to the mosque. Because remember, Muslims pray 5 times a day, and so it make it easy for them to come. So this mosque was then opened on February the 8th, 1957. It had finished by the end of 1956. But because the ladies in Guyana, remember many of them who had contributed greatly towards the building of the masjid, had said that we would like to come to the opening of our masjid. And so the Muslim community, the committee members waited. And so what they did is that 50 ladies chartered the BOAC plane and came to the opening of the mosque. Also we had Muslims from Trinidad who came to the opening of the mosque. And we had SM Jalil, who was instrumental in assisting the Muslims of Barbados, helping them by going around to the Muslims in Trinidad. So he was the one who officially opened the mosque by opening the door of the mosque to begin the prayer.
Thus, the Muslim community established their place of prayer, complete with unique features like the steps that allow members to ascend and experience one of the celestial wonders. There's also a dedicated room where children are taught the fundamental principles of their faith.
The mosque is really built from a stone, and then the outside was painted with white lime. There was also a stairs. As you enter, the stair was really so that Muslims really go by lunar calendar and not by solar calendar. So you determine the month at the beginning of the day and so on according to the lunar calendar. The Jews does the same thing too. And so at the beginning of the new moon, you'll find people would climb the stairs and to see and look for the new moon. The muazzin, the one who called for prayer, he would then also go up and call for prayer when it's time for the prayer. Most of the time he would also stay outside there on a small little stool, and then he would call people to pray. And then people would then, from around the area and so on, they probably would know the time, and then they would come and say their prayer. One of the things that used to happen in those days was that, the purpose of building this masjid, and the masjid was named City Masjid, because it was in this city area. And it was for the purpose also for those who are living out of the city, and they would go in town for their businesses and shopping. So at least it would be convenient for them to come to this place of worship. What used to happen would be that they would come here, and it was customary, especially only for those coming to this masjid, they would wear a pajama over their pants, right? So because remember they're going in town, and then after that they would come here to worship. So when they come to pray here, what they would do, they would take off their pants and hang it on one of those racks you will see there, hooks. You see the hooks there. At first there were many, many hooks. Hang their pants there, and then they would pray in their pajamas. And then when they finish saying their prayer, they would then put back on their pants, and then they would go back doing their own business. That then usually used to happen at the other mosque, the Juma Masjid. So this is something different that used to happen at the mosque. And of course, along with the mosque, and with every mosque you would find, in most of part of the world, that they will always have a place, a room for the children to learn about Islam, which we call madrasa, or Islamic school. And that happens when kids come from school, maybe 3 o'clock, and then they would have classes here from 5 until 6, or from 4 until 6, or 5 until 7. And that madrasa classes were basically to teach the children how to read the Holy Quran, because all of Muslim prayers, the 5-time prayers, are always said in Arabic. Whichever part of the world you live, whatever language you speak, these prayers are always said in Arabic. And so the children are taught like ABC of the Arabic words, alif, ba, ta, sa, and so on. And then they will be taught like the basic principle of Islam, how to say your prayer, what to do, what not to do, how to do your ablution.
In the Jewish religion, there is a mikveh bathhouse located outside of the synagogue used by some members for purification before entering. Similarly, in the Muslim faith, there is a designated area where members perform physical purification before entering the mosque to pray.
And of course, there will always be a room or section where there will be a place for ablution, so that when Muslim comes to prayer, first he has to clean himself, physical cleanliness. So he will wash his hands 3 times from the beginning, from the right side, and then he would wash his face, he would wash his hand again up to his elbows, he would wash his feet. And so ablution is very necessary and important in order to perform the prayer or salah. This is the place where many Muslims would do their ablution at home and then come to prayer. But there are others who would then do ablution here. So this is the pipe. There are pipes and so on, facilities for those who wish to do ablution here. And then you have facilities to dry their hands, etc. So no prayer is accepted unless you do ablution. Even within the Bible, you read Paul and Barnabas went and do ablution before they went into the synagogue. So that is the physical cleanliness. And then when you go in there, of course, you are now going to have the spiritual cleanliness.
Now, the mosque has been recognized as a national treasure by the Barbados National Trust, highlighting its significance not just as a place of worship, but as a vital part of our cultural heritage. Sabir Nakuda tells us why this designation is important.
In 2020, right, Barbados National Trust designated this place as a historical place based on its architectural style and also because of its antiquity. Because that architectural style has remained the same from the beginning on the 8th of February 1957 until the present day. All the glass windows and so on are the same, right? The space is the same. It has not expanded. The mosque has not expanded because of the space, and because it has become kind of a very important place among this area in this particular part of the society, in this area. You know, it is a landmark, you know, in this area. And at the same time, it may be one of the only place of worship that is open 5 times a day. So prayers are said 5 times a day, every day from the first day when it opened in February until the present time. And hopefully, inshallah, God willing, it will continue to be like that. That 5 times prayer will always be said, sunshine, rainfall, until the day of judgment.
You know, in our times, we have heard stories of the so-called established churches and that of the other denominations here in Barbados. In fact, as children, we were taught to celebrate the history of the former. Thanks to Sabir Nakuda, you have heard of the mosque's historical, its social, and its architectural importance, and how it continues to serve as a cornerstone for the Muslim community here in Barbados. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been My Community. The series continues next week at the same time. In the meantime, do take good care of yourself and look out for the interests of your neighbors.